Hey everybody, I'm out here working on the Mustang. Thought I'd give you an update on what's going on with it. Still haven't painted it yet. It's still been too cold. Hopefully here in the next month or so we can work towards getting it painted. But I had another issue come up, so I had to address it. Let me show you what's going on. So if you look closely, that's where the starter motor is supposed to be, and that's where the transmission is supposed to be. Unfortunately, the starter motor had some issue. So the starter motor has like a retaining clip inside it, or a retaining ring, like a washer. It busted, and then there's some bearings in there. They're like cylindrical bearings. I think two, maybe three of them popped out of there and ground the teeth on this particular Mustang. It's a inline six, so it has a torque converter with a ring gear on it, and it messed up a whole bunch of those teeth. And I would get to spots where the starter would just spin. I don't know if the starter was just spinning or if it was hitting where those teeth are all ground down. So I pulled the starter, found that issue. I inspected the teeth on the ring gear and just felt better to pull it apart. Drop the transmission, replace the ring gear, which on this model it's attached to the torque converter, and I'll show you that right here. So this is the torque converter out of this. It's a C4 transmission. A lot of the transmissions in this era are similar, and you can tell the difference by the bolt pattern on the bottom of the transmission. At any rate, the teeth do look okay, but these ones are covered in oil, but they're ground off. Some of them, there's like sections that are in pretty bad shape. See if you can, I don't think you can see it. But you can see they're ground off here. It's not horrible, but I know when I get to these spots, whether the starter was just having issues or it was the teeth. Yeah, you can see these teeth too. See how they're pretty ground off. So to avoid any issues in the future after replacing the starter, I decided to drop the transmission to see if there was metal chunks in there that I would have to remove that came from the starter. There were some, unfortunately, which is probably another reason why those teeth were ground down and notched out and the starter wasn't working great. So it was scary. I went to start it once and it was like a big bang and rattle. I didn't hear grinding, but just banging and like knocking, like the engine was knocking, but that wasn't the case. When it'd get to a good part in that ring gear, it would fire right up. But I couldn't feel good pulling those both apart. So now I've got the parts ordered. With the parts ordered, I can start putting this back together. Here is the transmission. The teeth are on here are all good because they're covered by the torque converter. There was a bunch of metal and nastiness down in here. Just pulled those out, cleaned it up. I did put some degreaser on it, wash it off a bit. You can tell it's still pretty dirty, but those bits wouldn't come off with the pressure washer. Before I did that, I did cover up, the front here. I did wrap this part where the drive shaft goes in, and then the speedometer goes here. I plugged those up, and then there's a few hoses on this other side. Here, and where's the other one? Here. These are for the transmission cooling lines. I plugged those up before I touched anything with water here because I don't want to get water in the gear. So that being said, now it's time to put my torque converter on and get ready to put this back in the Mustang. Don't have any footage of pulling it out. Basically, it was me, myself, and my son, and my dad. We pulled it up, pulled it out. It is tricky. We didn't get it up quite high enough to get the transmission out, but at any rate, we got to put this back in. I'm gonna start with putting the torque converter back on the transmission, since it has a specific way you got to put it on. Let's get going there. Here is the new torque converter. I did go ahead and I did some measurements, make sure it is the correct model. Now, from what I read, you don't want to fill these full of oil, but they've got to have oil in them because there's a lot of components here in the torque converter that you want lubricated. This particular transmission takes the Type F, so I do have some Type F here. I'm just going to pour down into the barrel, locked and loaded. I did some reading. I'm not sure. Some people say put a whole quart in there. Some people say don't. I'm sure it has some in there because I could see there was liquid. So I'm sure it's not completely dry, but I'm going to put it on. I don't want to put too much on because once I put it on there, it goes in, and then I'm going to have to tip it, and you don't want it completely full because once I tip it into the transmission, it'll spill oil everywhere. And I already cleaned up all the oil that I spilled getting it out. So that's all I'm going to put in. Once the transmission starts going, if it's properly engaged, from what I read, it just fills that puppy right back up with oil. So I'm not too concerned about it. It's got enough in there. I think we're good to go. Now, when I throw the torque converter on, there's 3 clicks. There's 3 gears it basically gets on. And let's go take a look at that now. First off, on the torque converter, you can see there's a notch here and another one on the other side. These notches are what engage the oil pump in the transmission. So you got to make sure it's engaged in there. Now let's go look at the other one. There's this first gear that it's got to hook onto, and then the second gear, and then the third one's in there, and you just got to turn it just right. You can hear it locked down in there 3 times, then it should sit in there pretty good. Let's give it a go. I'm ready to try this. I got the transmission under the car, on the jack. I got it in position, things tied up and out of the way. Let's see if we can get this in by myself. Side note, I did have my son come help me because I had to get it under the car off the jack. Then I had to kind of pivot it up onto the jack. Anyways, long story, let's get at it. So here's my jack set up. Got the torque converter is in place. I gotta get up to the flex plate and see if I can do it by myself. Let's see if we can do this. All right, gotta put this key somewhere. Obviously, this would be much easier if I had a second set of eyes and arms, so I have one person on each side of the transmission. I'm impatient. I'm an impatient guy, so I don't like to wait around. I should. It's safer. A, safer. B, it'll make things a lot easier. So anyways, let's get back under the car. I'm trying to line up the torque converter bolts. There's 4. And I gotta line them up with the flex plate and then slide them in, and then I can tighten them down one at a time, but I can rotate the motor as I do it so I can get all 4 of those tightened. Actually, I'll probably get those up, get them in the hole, and then I'll probably hook up the bell housing bolts first, but I've got to have those bolts lined up before I can do anything. So I'm going to put the camera down there so you can hopefully see what I'm doing. Okay, I have this bell housing bolt started. This one I can't start. I think that the transmission needs to just slightly adjust. The transfer case bolts are all started in their holes. Or not the transfer case, the torque converter. So I'm gonna see if I can get that one a little bit more, and then I'm gonna go underneath and see if I can get a few more to kind of, and see if I need to adjust and then get it tied in. So I'm gonna do that. With many swear words later, I've got this transmission hooked up. I've got 3 of the 4 bell housing bolts in and tight. I've also got 2 of the torque converter to flex plate bolts tight. I've got to rotate it so I can get one more nut on and then tighten the other one. But first, I'm going to also remove this transmission jack that I no longer need. So the transmission jack is in. I did get the rear support in. I got one side in. The bolts are not tight, but it's in place. This one, I got it over and I had to jack it up in place. It was just too tight to push it up in by hand. But you can see that the bolt and the nut are in, so the transmission is not going to go anywhere. I can now get this transmission jack out of here. And go, baby, go. And then I get that out of here, and then I will be able to take the plate off. I got a new gasket for the drain pan. And so I'm gonna drop that, make sure I've got all the old oil out of it, and then I will work on replacing the gasket. Now this is a C4 transmission, and near as I can tell, the best way to tell them apart from a C3, C4, C5 and 6 from the Ford for these models is the bolt pattern. I have an 11 hole bolt pattern. I'll drop a picture in here so you can see what I mean. Your bolt pattern may be different depending on what transmission you have. This one is a C4. I have already drained this, so there shouldn't be much oil in it. But I gotta get it off in case I got any water in this when I power wash it to clean it, which hopefully I didn't. But more importantly, I want to make sure all the old oil is out. I want to clean this oil pan and to replace the gasket. Now this gasket didn't look like it was in bad shape, but as cheap as they are, I think a new gasket cost me $5. I can make sure it's not leaking. It's a good gasket. Just one less thing to worry about. Like, gotta get all these out. I know I'm gonna make a mess. Hopefully not a big one. How many more do I got? Oh, one more. I got the last one. You see more left? Now that I got the pan out, let me show you what I mean between the differences between a C3, C4, C5, C6 transmission. Okay, so this is the C4 transmission. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bolts. So that tells me this is a C4 transmission. Here is the diagram. Up here, I'll put the diagram of the different transmission bolt models. This transmission, you know, it's got a little bit of goop in there. Yeah, a little bit of goop. I don't think it's a lot. I haven't had problems with the transmission. It shifts fine. So I'm hoping that's normal for between 50 and 60,000 mile car, engine and transmission. All right, what do I got next? I'm gonna let that transmission oil pan drip a little bit, get all that old oil out. I'm gonna clean up this pan, get the new gasket ready to go on it. That's in a box over there. I got new spark plugs. I'm not gonna deal with those yet because I've gotta rotate the motor. I gotta rotate it manually so I can tighten the flex plate bolts. And I need to check, there's one bell housing bolt I haven't got tightened yet. I got to do that. And another one I got to check, and then I'll just check all 4 of them, make sure we're good to go. Then I got to put the starter on. So just a few things, just a few minor things left. And then the exhaust. Oh man, exhaust is a pain in the butt. Anyways, got a few more things to wrap up, so I'll be back in a sec. So just double checking, I got the right oil pan gasket. Looks the same, a little bit different depending on the manufacturer. This one's like a rubber, feels like. This is a cork and rubber composite. So I'll just clean this up, get ready to swap it on. Welcome back. Day 2 of putting everything back together with the transmission in, fully bolted to the bell housing. I need to just wrap up a few things. The oil pan's been draining overnight. I need to put the pan back on. Got to put the starter motor in, hook it up. I did remove spark plugs so I could turn the motor. I'm gonna replace those. I gotta do exhaust because it's not hooked up. What else do I got? I think that's about it. All right, let's get to it. I do have my contacts in, but safety glasses, like dirt, grease, debris, everything falls on your face. I've had too many things in my eyeballs, so make sure you put your safety goggles on when you're going under the car, or even while you're working on the car, whatever. Transmission's in, the transmission oil pan is in. I've got everything ready to go. So let's go ahead and get under. We're gonna hook up the speedometer cable and their transmission linkage like that. It's an automatic, so it's the park, reverse, neutral, drive gear slider. We're gonna hook that up, make sure the electronics are good. I did break the electronic connection. When I was moving things around, I accidentally stepped on it and smash it. It still does go together, so I'm going to tape it, and then I'm gonna tie them up nicely so they don't drag down on the ground. So let's get into the car and go do that. So I'm just gonna tighten up some bolts down here, make sure we're good. And then I think we're at a point where we can put some fluid in this. Because I don't want to forget that. That would be really bad. And then I'm gonna get the starter motor on. And we'll go from there. See you in a minute. All right, next step. I'm getting a little transmission fluid in. Transmission's all set. Getting the cooling lines back on the transmission, a real pain in the butt. I gotta go hop back down under the car. I'm gonna put the drive line in that I recently rebuilt. I spray painted it so it doesn't rust anymore. And then I'll show you where the cooling lines are. Super tough to get to. A lot easier coming off than going back on. Let me car back in there and show you where we're at. Two things left I have to do to get this going underneath the car. I got to put the exhaust back on, and I've got to put on the inspection plate to the bell housing and the torque converter. You leave that so that you can take the inspection plate off and you can see the teeth. That's what I used to verify it was bad. Next up on the list, I'm gonna put spark plugs back in. These are the old ones, so I have to just may as well upgrade them since I got them out. So I'm going with the Autolite Platinum. These are the AP46, which are the model specified for the inline 6 on the Ford. So I do have to gap them. The gap for my vehicle is 0.050. So I have my little gap tool here. I will go ahead and gap them, and then we'll get them installed. The Mustang all wrapped up. I have it off the blocks. It's in the yard. I've driven it around once. I had some great footage. My main camera battery died. I pulled out my backup camera and I thought I recorded all this awesome footage, and wouldn't you know it, the card in it was non-existent, and so I thought it was recording. It wasn't. Anyways, the automatic transmission, pulling it out, popping it back in, was a few days worth of work. If I could work on it straight, probably 8 hours out and back in. The hardest part was getting it up on blocks high enough and making sure that the torque converter was all the way back in properly. Not a hard job. Definitely, if you're nervous about it, I wouldn't do it, but I think you can do it. It's not something that's undoable by just a regular Joe like myself. I was nervous to do it. I read a lot, I researched, made it happen. The car is running good. I started it just for kicks and giggles without the muffler attached, and it just sounded cool. My wife, everybody came out to the garage like, what's going on? It sounded great. Obviously too loud to drive around in the neighborhood, and that's why you have mufflers. So I hooked the muffler back up. I do have some holes in my muffler, just some little pinholes. I can see where it's leaking, some condensation. I may need to address that in the future. It doesn't sound bad, it's just some leaking. There is kind of a high-pitched whirring sound. I'll see if I can get it on the camera. Let me know in the comments below what you think it might be. I'm thinking maybe the torque converter, everything's brand new in there. It's got to work in. I had oil in it when I started it. Added some more. In total it was about 6.5 quarts. I thought maybe I didn't have enough when I first started it. I don't know. Type it in the bottom if you have any ideas. Anyways, I'm gonna start the car up. We'll see if we can hear the sound. I can get it on camera, and for the next one, just go out there, do it, figure it out, and get it done yourself. So have fun. I enjoy doing it. Hope you guys can too. See you around. All right, I'm here under the car. Just take a listen. This is no good picture. Get up off the ground. It's like kind of like a humming sound. It does not sound bad. It just sounds different than what it normally did. So I just got to go to the store, pick something up. I'm not going far. I'm not worried about it. Everything's running. Everything sounds good other than this whirring, humming sound. I don't know what to call it. Anyways, hope you guys having fun out there. Have a great day. Today is the day of the eclipse. Let's see if we can get it. No, I'm not in totality. I think we got it about 47% at max. I can't tell. It's a little darker out here. If you've never been to the totality zone on an eclipse, I highly recommend it. It is awesome. I did in 2017 and highly recommend it. Couldn't make the trip this time, but anyways, enough of that. You guys have fun, get out there and enjoy life.